Members, the committee has resumed.
Before the dinner break, the debate on vote justice had just commenced, and the Honourable Simon Power has the call and has 4 minutes and 4 seconds remaining should he wish to take it.
Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable
Mr Chairman, I was surprised actually when we got to vote justice just before the dinner break because no one wanted to take a call, and I decided that I'd better stand up and say something, otherwise the entire justice sector would pass through a vote in the committee stages of the estimates debate without anybody from any other political party making a comment. And I'm pleased to see that on the committee resuming, that there are a number of people down here with an interest in vote justice, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them make a contribution. Before the dinner break, I was specifically not you, Mr Hughes. It's not your strong point. But before the dinner break, I was thanking the Justice Select Committee for its enormous work rate over the last 18 months, and was about to embark on a bit of insight into what the 18 months ahead might look like for that committee as part of the estimates process, which of course is forward-looking as opposed to backward-looking. The common thread that bound those initial reforms, 14 bills that committee dealt with during that 18 months, and will continue to keep that committee busy, is frankly the need to protect the vulnerable. That will continue to run through justice policy in the year ahead. We have an ongoing review of victims' rights, which is currently having its submissions looked through by the Ministry, the Government's response to the Sexual Violence Task Force, further changes to sentencing for crimes against children. And I'd like to talk in my remaining time a bit more about some of these reforms and other priorities for the coming year. In addition to the way we are going to look at Part 8 of the Crimes Act, which is offences against the person, this year the year ahead will also see reform to some of the institutions through which the justice system functions. Institutions often evolve, particularly in the justice sector, through precedent, tradition, history, repeated practices and the like. Now, those institutions need to provide continuity and predictability for those who use the justice system. But the danger is such incrementalism can lose sight of the fact that society's expectations may have changed with respect to those institutions. The review of legal aid by Dame Margaret Baisley in the last 18 months showed us that reform in this area could not wait. The government has largely accepted Dame Margaret Baisley's recommendations and are planning to implement those key recommendations over the next 2 years. Some of these changes will require legislative amendment, and I intend to introduce that legislation very shortly. Simplification of the criminal justice system will also feature in the year ahead. And one of the historic, points that's worth making in the committee was that when I first became the Minister of Justice, everybody told me that to fix problems in the justice system, all I needed to do, or the government needed to do, was 2 things: appoint more judges and build more courthouses. And it struck me that must have been the advice that all of my predecessors had received over a long period of time, and nobody had sat down and thought to themselves, or what is it about the justice system that actually needs improvement? Somebody's got to do something around here, Mr Hughes. So members of this committee can expect Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable
Simon Power. Now that I've started, I'm not going to stop. Now that this piece of work, which is well underway, and the first discrete part of that reform was dealt with by the AVL legislation recently in the House, more legislation in that area will be coming forward. Of course, some of the other work that is likely to arrive in the House this year is work relating to the Law Commission's report with respect to changes to alcohol, and those changes which are making their way through the system presently are likely to be probably the largest piece of work that the Justice Select Committee will deal with over the next 12 to 18 months. It is not uncomplicated and will test the skills of the very able chair of that committee and his able colleagues in working their way through trying to determine if appropriate legislation can target real harm and the impact that alcohol has, particularly on the wider justice system. Of course, also within the ambit of Vote Justice in the year ahead will be the confirmation and work done around the interaction between the citizenry and the state by way of elections, which means that we will be working our way through the second reading, committee stages and third reading of legislation bringing about a referendum or asking the public if they wish to have a binding referendum on MMP. If that legislation makes its way through all stages of the House, then that will occur. The first two questions of that process will occur at the 2011 election. And of course, all members of the House will be anxious to cast aside historic grievances and deal in a sensible and forward-looking way with the matter of electoral finance reform. And I look forward to continuing discussions with colleagues on all sides of the House about that rather historically controversial issue, but I have no doubt it will not contain the same level of vitriol and controversy that it did as we move into the future in a way that hopefully will see some of the remaining issues which remain controversial for some members on either side of the House to be ironed out in a way that will hopefully see electoral finance law reform endure beyond just one election. Mr. Chairman, these are exciting times for Vote Justice, and I ask all members of this committee to join me in this debate and advancing their own thoughts on how we can improve the justice system in the years ahead.
Call David Garrett.